who attend the Waldorf school. And then the other garden beds are planted by volunteers who include teachers at the school, but also community members who can come from anywhere in the Edmonton area. So we don't have a boundary of this garden, and we are a communal garden. So everybody is responsible for attending everything. And we also have been operating without much structure that way. Our challenge is getting volunteers to sign up for certain tasks. It seems to be easier for some of our volunteers to just come when it's convenient for them, especially those who live right beside the school. And we've had mixed results with this model. And so this year we're working towards a little more structure, but with still some flexibility so that people can come when it is convenient for them. And when it comes to reporting, we work as a committee. So we're a committee under the Waldorf Education Society of Edmonton board. And so there's some paperwork and whatnot that goes between us, but we do not charge for our garden. So we don't have to maintain funding from rental of plots because it is a communal garden. And most of our work is done through donations and grants.
Okay, thank you. Towards the end, I think we'll talk a little bit about where people can look for grants as well. That's one of the things we talk about in resources. So Susan, did you have something? I was going to call on Leona. She has her hand up. Oh, you're muted.
I don't have the hand icon, but I'll go whenever you want to have me in.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if you guys, to raise your hand down under at the bottom where it says reactions, if you click on that, it gives you a raise hand option. The only thing is you have to remember to take it down when you're done because it will stay up on your little box.
I see. I've never used that one. Usually it's there all the time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Leona.
Hi. Still having trouble with mute things. So anyway, yeah, so Campus Roots started back in 2009, and I was a liaison between the university and the actual board that was putting this together. It was the brainchild of a student who had ambitions, and he's moved on, but the concept has remained. So that's a good news story. It was built using grants, and it's upgraded using grants. We do charge, it's individual plots. We started out with a community plot, and that was a failure. We had a lot of free rider problem, which is that a lot of people did the work and the other people reaped the benefits. So that didn't work out too well. And so we took up that plot and we started to build individual plots. And we subsequently, probably about early 2010s, doubled the footprint of the garden that we had. So we have 42 plots now, 42 individual plots. The rental is, there's a $40 deposit, which carries over from year to year, and you rent the plot for 25 cents per square foot. So my 72 square foot plot, 4 foot by 18 feet, I think it is, comes to $18. So it's cheap. And if in fact you renege on your responsibilities, then the deposit is, you're booted and the deposit is kept. And when you sign up every year, we sign an agreement that we will commit to 6 hours of community service in the community garden. And that includes obviously weeding, the community part of it, not your plot, but we have a perimeter around the plots, and then beyond that is community space. So you're responsible for your plot and your perimeter, and then beyond that is community hours. And we have tried work bees, and that had limited success. The comment that Heather made about having people committing to their community time in a discretionary fashion works. So what we've done is we have the 6 hours minimum that you're expected to commit to. You can do that in individual time. You can do it in work bees. We also have committees set up around particular community functions like composting. The orchard, we built an orchard, so that's probably another half a footprint. So we're 2.5 footprints from what we started with. So you kind of pick your battle and you commit to that with the committee. And we did this because the board was spending too much time doing all of the community work. And so it was a way of getting people to actually understand that this is a community emphasis garden. And so, yeah, that's probably all I have down here to commit to or to comment on right now. So I'll have more to say later, probably.
Leona, I just had a couple questions for you. So
Sure.
you have a not-for-profit board that
Yes.
operates it.
Yes.
So it's not run through the university. It's just on university property.
It's on we leased the land from the university for something like $1 per year on 5-year terms.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And then yeah, I think that was
the university gets a benefit because they like to hold it up as part of their environmental sustainability goal. So
okay.
it's
And
protocol.
and I know a lot of universities have gardens or farms. This is separate from that, right? You don't.
Yeah, we don't have a farm. No.
Okay. Okay.
This is separate. This is community based. The city approached the university because they wanted to encourage a community garden on the west side, and the university had the land. So that's how it got set up.
And then in Lethbridge, you also have the community garden by the SPCA, correct?
We have the community garden by the SPCA, and that has been up and running for a long time.
Okay.
And it's up there. It's unfenced. I think they're individual plots as well. We also have a Westminster Community Association garden and a London Road. Well, I guess it's in Kinsman Park. So, and those are plots that they're raised beds the ones in the Kinsman Park are raised beds. They're gardened communally, and they're harvested, as people walk by, basically.
Right. Okay.
So, so we have 4 that I know of. I think the one in Copperwood, which was started because of the developer there. And the problem with the developer kind of encouraging this is that when they go away, then it kind of falls apart, because you do need to have some organization around it. And
yes.
So in our case, we have a board. There's about 10 people on it.
Okay.
So
thank you very much. Does one of the people, is Janetta on here? Janetta, did you want to talk about how it operates in Edmonton, kind of the entire overarching organization of community gardens?
Yeah, sure. So we support all of the models. Everything that I've heard today, we support it. In fact, the Waldorf Garden with Heather is one of the gardens that we funded. So we don't have any restrictions on what a garden feels is best for them, and either the community that they're trying to create or that's reflective of the community that's already there. So we just see everything right across the gamut. Excuse me. But one thing, and this is just based on, just my conversations with garden coordinators and our annual survey, is the whole thing, and I did hear some folks allude to it on the call, about the work being concentrated, within the 20%, right? 20% do 80% of the work, which is over time, it leads to burnout. So, you get these garden coordinators and small teams that have been doing it. They signed up for maybe, I'll do it for, a few years. 6 years later, they're still doing it. 8 years later, they're still doing it and having a hard time with that succession planning. So that's just something I want to throw out there, because we're just hearing so much of it in the Edmonton region, that when you get started on something, what will be your succession process, so you don't end up in that predicament, because it's supposed to be enjoyable, right? It's not supposed to become burdensome and like, oh my God, this is like driving me crazy. It's supposed to be, a productive, enjoyable activity. So yeah, I just wanted to share that for some consideration.
Excellent. Thank you, Janetta. And maybe we could get Is Erin still on here? Oh yes, Erin, maybe you could talk about how the process works in Calgary.
Sure. Hi. Yeah, so my position with the city is very specific to gardens in communities on public land. So I think most people know there's private gardens. So I work with Ranchlands Community Association. There's a garden in that community, but it's on the church land. So there's no need for me to get involved in that one. But from a perspective of local community associations or local residents in Calgary, if they're interested in getting a community garden going in a park space in Calgary, they would need to work with their local community association to get that going. And then the community association most likely would start up a gardening committee with people that are interested. And then the long-term goal is to get a license of occupation. So I think the lady from Lethbridge mentioned how their lease works. Our license of occupations are 15 years long, and it's $1 per year as well. So it's $15 at the beginning of the term. And then at that point, then the gardeners can basically go ahead and fundraise and do what they need to do to build the garden. And just looking through the questions, there's lots of different styles. Most of the ones that I've done or been involved with in the suburbs are the raised garden style, and they'll put a fence around it and have some public art on the fence and things like that. But there is some older gardens in the city of Calgary that are under control of the community association that are not so specific that way. So yeah, the City of Calgary's website has a fairly good template on like a checklist on how to get a garden going in Calgary, but most likely they end up in my hands, the councillor's hands, or the community association's hands to get them started. So, and most of the NPCs, so neighborhood partnership coordinators, so my position across the city, have either experience doing a garden or they can rely on another staff that has done it to help them through the process. So, yeah, it's complicated sometimes. Sometimes it's more straightforward. In Kincora specifically, I think like Jen alluded to, there's a lot of hands in the pie. Myself, I also have a project I want to put in there. We're looking at a concrete ping pong table to integrate into the garden because we want to make it a really family community space, because there's a pathway there and there's a playground there. So we want to make it a multi-generational space. And so there's definitely some complications and challenges. So hopefully we can work through those to move that forward. So. But yeah, in Calgary specifically, I'm not sure how Edmonton works. I know Edmonton has a similar staff position with the city, but in Calgary, it's working through my position on a public city land to get a garden going. So thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Erin. So I'm just going to talk for a minute briefly about Medicine Hat, because I think probably a lot of us from smaller communities unfortunately, we don't have dedicated city positions or frameworks in place from a municipal standpoint to get gardens going. I don't think there's anyone here from Red Deer, but Red Deer I haven't talked to the person there for a little bit, but they had a city position and they had contracts laid out. They had a whole way to get a garden going. So they have city-owned gardens, but they also support neighborhood ones, where neighborhood associations or groups would come to the city and say, we want to start a garden. And they say, okay, well, here's the list of things you need to do and have, and here's what we'll provide and how we'll help you. But that is not the case for a lot of smaller communities. Here in Medicine Hat, our first community garden was a really long time ago down by our senior center. I'm not sure why that one ended. That was before my time. Then we had one up at a church on some church property, and it developed soil issues, and it had to be, it had seepage from a irrigation canal, and the soil became too saline to use anymore. And so then it moved again, and is now, we have several. We have one behind our health unit, and that's on AHS property. Now, the tricky thing about that is that this happened before AHS existed. It was back when we still had regional boards. And a couple of years ago, we decided to get the property fenced because we have a severe problem with urban deer in Medicine Hat, and everyone's gardens were just being eaten, and the deer are not afraid of people. So you could almost go and stand beside them. And I one time was throwing like green tomatoes at them to try and get them out of a plot. They don't even look at you. They don't care. So in the process of needing approval to get that fence put on, we discovered that there had never been any formal written agreement of any kind. It was a gentleman's agreement on a handshake to take over this large plot of land and put in permanent structures. We had to actually have AHS contracts write up a thing because nothing existed. One of our other gardens is on city property, which we lease, like some of the other organizations here. We lease from the city, I think, for $1 a year in 3-year terms. On an old property, which the soil, we couldn't use in-ground gardens at all because it was contaminated. So we have all raised beds, which we had the soil brought into. Those are both fenced, again, because of deer. We haven't really had a lot of problems with vandalism and theft, but the deer just decimate everything. And so we've had to put out quite a bit of money on fencing. And of course, down in the south, unlike more northern regions, we also have to ensure that we have some form of irrigation and water accessible, because we can often go for the entire summer season without any precipitation. Sometimes it will rain in April and then not again until October. So definitely that's an added cost and issue facing gardeners and community gardens in regions of the province where we don't get as much rain. But yeah, we have those two where people rent plots. There is a community garden in the city for the food bank, which is a communal use garden. Again, one of those ones where people can go in, like Heather's is, where people can go in and work in it and harvest from it without having the commitment to a single plot or paying a fee. I think that works fairly well, except for the one thing I've noticed from that garden. I mean, I'm not really involved with that one, but the thing I've noticed from a community standpoint is when we get to the end of the season, especially those nights when frost is coming, and gardeners that have that kind of more possessive feeling of a garden are making sure their plants are covered or harvested in advance. Those communal use gardens, nobody does that there, and often they lose everything to frost. And so that's really unfortunate. I think that's just kind of the nature of that kind of a communal use garden, though, that there's maybe not the same level of ownership that happens, obviously, when you've rented a plot and you're maintaining it. So yeah, we are non-for-profit. People rent the plots through us. There is no real, other than that land from the city, we don't really have a lot of involvement from our municipality at all. Does anyone else want to talk about how their gardens operate or their organizations operate in their communities? Susan?
I will, Allison. Yeah, our community garden model is 10 years old, as I mentioned, and it's $25 a year. $10 goes to the garden, $15 goes to the association. We have an agreement that if somebody's away, we made sticks that say water me. And we put the stick in the garden, it means we're away and somebody will water our garden. We get our water from the muni and the water is free. What else did I want to say? We're all raised. We have 75 gardens, raised beds. We three times a year we have a gathering. Spring we have, everybody gets together and helps everybody plant. Middle of the year we get together again to see how everybody's growing, and in the fall we have another one where we close down the gardens. It's everybody's cost. Our gardens have 8 by 12 boards on them, and it's the garden's personal cost to replace the boards. We have a great big compost heap that we all put our compost in. Muni is very supportive. Actually, they even advertise people to go and visit the garden when they come to Jasper. And we have a little sign that tells everybody to, I can't remember what it says, but it says, walk through the garden, feast with your eyes, but please don't take our hard-earned prize, which means don't pick. So we got that. And let's see what else. And we don't use any fertilizers at all. Like I have had the sign that says, fertilizer-free Alberta is what I have on my garden. That's what everybody abides by. So it's been working really well, and it's really built community. We have a waiting list, as a matter of fact, to get into the garden. So we have 75 plots. So that's status.
Susan, would they expand it if you continually show a waiting list, or is it an actual issue if there is not more space to expand
There
into?
is space, and we're negotiating with there's what we call the AMA building next to us, which is a derelict building, which we like to tear down and put the garden. So we're negotiating with the uni to try and see if we can get the building, get that land. Yeah.
Okay.
There are 2 apple trees in the garden too.
Okay. Yeah, I know a lot of gardens include fruit trees or some kind of a food forest. At one of our gardens, we have a food forest, which when we fenced it, we left that part open, like it's fenced, but it's unlocked for community members to access and use, versus the plots where it's just for the people who have rented.
Ours has a 9-foot fence all around it because of the animals, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I know Kenmore and Banff have had issues.
Yeah.
I know they've done some very innovative things with greenhouses and a rooftop garden, one of them, just because of that. There's a safety issue as well with the wildlife, right? So it's not just that they're pests, but they actually can be a danger to gardeners. And so I know they've had to work around, and that can be quite cost prohibitive for some communities when you're having to do a lot of that kind of stuff. Wanda, yes.
So I was just thinking about how people would get money for this, and Scott's has a $2,500. It's at the end of February, but I mean, just for next year, people were ready. So Scott's, I think it's called GROW, GRO, has a small grant, but Federated Co-op has a huge grant, minimum 25,000. But I'm thinking in the cities that 25,000 for fencing, for garden sheds, rototillers, like that is an amazing grant to apply for. And it also is March 1st, I believe. But just to get ready for next year for those people who are planning something.
Yeah, our one garden that we had to fence a couple of years back, it's quite large, but it cost us over $16,000 to fence it. So when you're looking at costs like that, yeah, you need to be looking for grants because it's extremely pricey. Does anyone else want to talk about how their community gardens operate from an organizational standpoint or management?
Could say something here, Allison. We have a community garden manager. She's not paid, but she coordinates the garden and organizes all the events that we have. And we just switched from one community coordinator to another this year, but seems to be working. Our garden, we had one fight last year, one real big fight between 2 women. One woman, she was trying to extend her garden, and it went into the other gardener's garden and ruined her rose bush, and there was quite a fight, but we settled it after that.
So Susan, are you guys allowed then to plant perennials? Like you're allowed to plant anything? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a general rule of no perennials in ours because it's year-to-year rentals.
So then no green onions, no chives.
Generally, people leave those or take them with them if they leave. But we do, our one garden, which is raised beds, tends to have less turnover in participants. And a lot of people there have put small fruit bushes and perennial plants like strawberries into them. And we just kind of turned a blind eye to that because typically those are also people who are highly involved, maintain their plots and come back year after year. So it's not really a problem with them as much. Sometimes it's over-enthusiastic new gardeners and that don't really know a lot about gardening who end up planting things that can turn out to be invasive or problematic for other gardeners in dealing with in the future. So Wanda.
So both of the gardens that we have exterior raspberry bushes, so just along the exterior of the fence because the deer leave them alone by and large. And we also have rhubarb in the corners, so nobody gardens right up to the corner. And so we, yeah.
Good, yeah.
Oh,
So I think
I see a question from, sorry, Leona had asked about that grant. Sorry, sorry, no,
oh, no, yeah, Leona just had a comment on there. Succession planning in any nonprofit volunteer organization is an issue. The issue with community gardens is that there's likely physical labor on top of commitment to governance. And yes, very much so, because it's one thing to sit in a room in a meeting and talk about things. It's another thing to have a person go out with a rototiller and or weed for 6 hours or arrange for, yeah, irrigation systems to be put into place. So there is definitely a physical component to it that can complicate things, and can be difficult for, like, because not everyone is capable of contributing in those physical ways too. So yeah, so let's maybe move on to, I mean, we've talked about things like paid, shared plots, individual fees. One thing, so here's a question that I frequently get from people is how to deal with people who start strong at the start of the year. They come and they plant, they've maybe rented a plot or they've committed to taking care of a certain thing, and then they don't show up. What is good enough? Yes. Pick up the phone, Susan said. Yeah, so at our organization, we have a contract that gardeners sign when they sign up in the spring, committing to maintaining their plot. And we try to let people know, if you cannot if you become ill or have to be away, if something prohibits you from taking care of your plot, please let us know. We will try and accommodate you, find other people to maintain it. Especially the more seasoned gardeners tend to know each other and will ask each other to do something if there's a problem. But there is usually 1 or 2 plots in each garden every year where, like, chickweed completely takes over, or some kind of invasive weed, and gardeners around them start getting really angry because it's coming into their plots. And so I have seen in the past, I can't remember where I saw it, but it was like a square foot box, and it was like, you could, if you laid it down in any part of the garden, if there was more than a certain number of weeds within that square foot, then the gardener was contacted to come. I mean, that's extremely specific, but have you guys found anything that works really well for your gardens in your experience? I think Leona has something for this.
Well, actually, I was going to comment on the whole issue of perennials as well, but I can talk to this one too. Just on the issue of sort of the things that go from year to year. We do have a communal raised bed that's strictly herbs, and raised beds that are strictly strawberries, and we do have our orchard for the fruity stuff. And so we also have a very long list of invasive plants that we do not allow to have planted in the garden because they go to seed quite quickly and then they become weeds, right? So over the years, we've become fairly strict about that. With respect to enforcement, we do have the deposit system, and we have had occasions where people have forfeited that deposit. But basically, we have a very fearless, put it that way, members on the board who actually have no compunction about getting a hold of people and telling them that their plot is weedy and they need to get in there. And I mean, sometimes, you know, the ebb and flow of the heat and the moisture down here, all of a sudden your clean garden can be dirty in a week because of, you know, bindweed just blows up. And so I've actually had the call that my plot is getting weedy and had to go in there. But that's kind of how we do it. And if they really, really don't show up, they're given warnings and warnings and warnings, and then the plot is taken over. So, and we've had people who start up with very good intentions and then just discover that gardening isn't really up their alley, and they just kind of literally walk away from it. So yeah, they're given a few chances, and then it becomes a community plot issue, and there's a bee to clean it up, basically. So
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think in our contract, we have a clause in it that if you've been contacted a certain number of times without response and you don't clean it up, that then the organization will hire someone at $15 an hour to weed, and you will be sent the bill. I don't know if we've actually ever sent out a bill, maybe once in 15 years, but typically people after a letter or two come and clean it up. Or if it's early enough in the season, sometimes we turn it over to other gardeners. So if they feel like they can still get plants in there fast enough to get some kind of a harvest, then we give it over to them, because usually people are eager for more space. Like the seasoned gardeners are just like eyeing up those plots and planning what they're going to put in there if they could get their hands on the space.
Actually, we have a deadline for planting in our garden, and coincidentally, it was the former president of the board who became dangerously close to that deadline, and so we rallied and cleaned up her plot, helped her clean up her plot and get some plants put into it in time. But we do have a deadline, and if they fall over the deadline, then it gets planted up as a community plot for the food bank. So.
We have to remember this is about community gardens. It's not about sending letters to reprimand. It's about talking to the people to help them become part of the community, not excommunicating from the community. That's
yeah. And that, I mean, honestly, you do want to create that healthy community around it. But I mean, there is some times where plots become so unmanageable that they're compromising the ones around them. And one way I would suggest to get around that a bit is we've noticed a real huge difference in the style of garden. So one of our gardens is an in-ground garden, and then the other one is a raised bed. And we get virtually zero complaints ever from the raised bed gardeners, because having it up off of the ground, you don't get as much drift from weeds. It's way more manageable to maintain. We really recommend raised, like when we talk to people about putting new gardens in any kind of a place, we say, don't even bother with in-ground. First of all, you need to do all kinds of soil testing to check and see about contaminants, and there's lots of things you can't control with it. And it's just easier to maintain physically and visually for the people around it, because we get a lot of concerns about how are the neighbors going to think about having this garden here. When it's a raised bed, it just, everything looks tidier, it's easier to take care of, less drift from weeds. And so I always recommend to people, and you have a lot more control over the soil you're putting into it, and that kind of thing. So if you're looking to start a garden from scratch, definitely raised beds is the way to go.
I just want to respond to Susan's comment. I think, you can take it literally that there's these, and maybe in some cases there are these sort of blunt letters that go out, and yeah, blunt letters are maybe a blunt force. But I think that in some cases, the gardeners that are perhaps not quite appreciating the responsibility are usually newer gardeners, and so it's more of a parenting approach to not letting them off the hook, being firm, and kind of nudging them in the right direction. So it's not as brittle as perhaps it's been portrayed, but there has to be some accountability that the gardeners take for their plots, and actually the thing, it goes to that lots of people like to plant the kales and the cabbages and stuff, and they're flea beetle attractants, and so when you get an infestation of flea beetles happening in a community garden, it's like, yeah, problematic. And so trying not to dictate, but to say, look, this is a community garden, and what happens in your plot does affect the neighboring plots. So things like that, just we have to have some kind of discipline. hard, maybe even that sounds hard, but we do have to have some kind of discipline over the gardeners, and they have to understand the responsibility in a community setting. So.
Yeah, we had an infestation of a bug last year. It started in a single plot. The gardener was not very, they didn't come down to their garden very often to check it, which is the one bad thing with a raised bed, is that if it's being rained on, which we had a surprising amount of rain last year, people just didn't bother because they knew their weeds wouldn't affect anyone else. So they just left it. But then this beetle that no one could recognize came on the plants and completely ate. She had potatoes. It ate all her potatoes down, and it wasn't a potato beetle either, though. I don't know what it was. And then it came over onto my plot. It came over onto 4 adjoining plots all the way around hers. Some plants it didn't touch, but it was on everything, and they were like clingy to you. If they got on you, it was really hard to get them off. And they were quite large, and we didn't even know what to do about them because we couldn't figure out what they were. But in literally, I want to say less than 3 days, it had eaten everything out of her plot and then started moving on. And then they all just disappeared. So we don't know what happened to them either. And no one ever could figure out what they were. But yes, definitely there's the idea of responsibility to others that comes with community gardening that doesn't exist when you just garden in your own yard. So I just want to go, I'm just looking back at the questions here. Building community. So some of you have talked about, Susan talked about like 3 annual get-togethers. I'm very curious to know, especially in the neighborhood association gardens, do you have specific events to support community building, or is the garden itself the community builder within your neighborhood association? Any of you who participate that way, if you want to talk about that. Heather, yes.
I can. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
go ahead.
I'll go Heather and then Aaron.
Okay, I can talk about what we would like to do. Our garden has only been through 2 growing seasons. So the first season was 2019, which was great because people could come to the garden for group planting sessions. And that was the year that we planted all our fruit trees and shrubs. So we had a lot of work gatherings that were helpful for getting our core team of people connected. And of course, last year, we did not do any kind of gatherings in the garden for obvious reasons. But what our garden has and what we would like to use going forward is we have a patio that is built around a herb spiral. And we've thought about hosting patio parties at the garden that are not about, it's not about the gardening necessarily, but it really is about the socializing and maybe the eating and sharing of food and drink. To bring people together in that social way. We also have requests for more workshops. So we've had very successful composting workshops prior to, in 2019, we had a composting workshop, and this year we had a couple of Zoom workshops. And there is interest from our gardeners in having more educational opportunities together, but hands-on in the garden. So people like that idea of coming and working in the garden and learning from each other more so than a classroom setting. So these are things we aspire to achieve. And hopefully this summer, if we can have more gatherings and are capable of sharing some food and drink together, we might implement that this year. But if not, it'll be next year's work.
Excellent. Thank you, Heather. That's good to hear. Aaron.
Sure. Yeah. So just a couple things that some of my communities have done over the years. So kind of already been touched on, but where do I start? So a lot of them partner with schools, and they'll use like the gardens and the schools together for like the environment class. So learning about composting and learning about gardening. So that happens in Northern Hills, where I live in the north part of the city. Sherwood is a garden that I'm currently working with. They do a harvest party every year. So they'll harvest their garden and they'll invite the community to come down to learn about the garden and share some of the food. a lot of gardens have also done, in Calgary, we don't have as many deer, obviously, and especially in the north, we don't have a ton of deer, but we do have a ton of rabbits. So a lot of them do the 4-foot black chain link fences to keep the rabbits out. And they'll partner with local preschools or local schools to do like the fence art. So similar to like the Stream of Dreams fish that you'll see on the fences along schoolyards. So they'll take like a wooden fish or a wooden animal. They'll get the kids to paint it, and then they'll lacquer it, and then they'll attach that to the garden fence to kind of do a community art project. I used to have a community, Valley Ridge, which is just on the west side of the city, and they did a Sunday night music in the garden event every month, I think, on a Sunday, or maybe actually in the summer every Sunday. And it was just local bands or local singer-songwriters would come, and there'd be a PA system there, and they could hook in and sing and do their performance. And while people just brought their lawn chairs and sat within the garden beds to listen to the music. So that's been popular. I also had a Brentwood Community Association, which has a very strong garden, and they did a project with, we have social workers that work for the city of Calgary as well. So in partnership with our social worker, we did a project with the seniors home nearby, and the seniors would talk about sort of their favorite recipes and gardening in the past. And they did a public art project where they turned those recipes into public art pieces and had those mounted in the garden beds. So just kind of a lot of cool things and ideas around bringing the community in. And then obviously the gardeners have a lot of social events and planting parties and seed exchanges and things like that. So just lots of ideas that I've seen, haven't done personally, obviously, but have been involved with through my position. So yeah, thanks.
Those are awesome. I love the idea of the concert in the garden. That sounds just lovely. And that's something that can even be done socially distanced right now. Like you could be far enough apart and outdoors that it would be safe to have that in this season. Jen, you had something to add?
So talking about Sherwood Garden, I was actually helping out there last year for their festival, their harvest festival. And one of the things that, because they didn't have a lot of participants in their garden, we did the festival and it invited like all the community to come out, but we put our COVID guidelines before they came. So I think that was also really important, is to say, you must wear your mask, you must keep distanced, because there's some people who just don't want to do that. And it was like, if you want to come to our party, you have to do this. So that was one thing. What a couple of things we did for ours is we partnered with the city's multicultural division, and we had a multicultural harvest festival. So all of our gardeners, the ones that grew things from their like native countries or ancestral things, we identified them in the gardens, and then we had a garden walkthrough. So then they could share their culture through their gardening. And then we also all those gardeners provided recipes. So then we handed out those recipes as a multicultural activity. And then we also had, we did a seed share. So we took seeds from our gardens and we made seed packs and we shared them with all the community. So they were like different things that people could grow in their own home gardens, or they could come back next year. So, and then our number was on there to register for a plot for next year. So that was a big thing. We were trying to get more members to come in to register. So that was kind of our way of advertising, was here's some seeds, come back next year and plant them. And then I went to the farmers markets and I got advertising from our farmers markets. And then I put out the advertising from them. And we also got a funding grant for our multicultural aspect. So we were able to fully fund our harvest festival for it. And we even did little like prizes. So we had like a little gardening box that had like some gardening tools in it and like a garden in a jar and a couple things like that. So it was kind of encouraging people like, come see us. And then we partnered with our horticultural society, and they offered 3 workshops throughout our festival. So they gave free workshops for our festival, which was amazing. So we had a lot of community members in to enhance it. And I think one of the big things that I was super happy about was the multicultural aspect. And because we had such a diverse population of people in our garden, I learned about gardening from Africa, from China, from Japan. And so that was really exciting for me to learn about that, and learning about different cultures and how they incorporate food. So because Canada's so great about that now. Well, we're trying to be. Yeah. And that was my contribution.
That's amazing. That sounds like it would have been so much fun to participate in.
It was, and people kept distance and they wore their masks, and we even had sanitizers donated. So everybody got sanitizer. It was great.
Yeah, so I'll give a couple examples of things we've done in the past here in Medicine Hat. We're not ever usually looking to increase the number of people gardening because we're at capacity always, and we have a wait list. We usually get through the wait list by the time gardening season actually starts. You know, some people have moved away, some circumstances have changed, so they take their name off. We're usually able to get through that list by the time the actual season starts, but we want to create community within our community gardens. And so some of the things we've done in the past, obviously we run workshops. We did run, actually, I want to say it was a 2-month new gardening program where we hired someone in the community who is a very avid gardener to come and work with the new gardeners in the community garden to teach them about gardening, because we find that's a real problem of turnover. Like, you have probably 90% of gardeners are know what they're doing and come back year after year, but that 10% it turns over every year because like Wanda or someone said, people try it, they maybe discover it isn't their thing, which is fine. Some people though really want to do it, but they have such they don't know how to do it right, and they get such poor results that it really discourages them. So we wanted to catch those people and teach them enough that they would want to keep going with, if they had the right kind of instruction to go along with it. And then, so we have done harvest parties, we've done work bees. One thing we use, our food forest, we use for summer programming for kids. So we partner a lot with our local immigration services, as well as the Medicine Hat Public Library, who runs day camps, and they bus the kids up to the food forest, and then we provide programming for a day, at half a day or a day, where leaders, what they do, they talk about food systems, they talk about sustainability, they show them, it's very hands-on. The kids get to pick and harvest things, and then they usually make 1 or 2 things to eat from stuff in the garden. And the kids love it. Like, they just absolutely love it. And so we usually do that, like I said, in conjunction with a couple organizations here in town. And we actually were even able to do that last year a bit because it's entirely outdoors, and you can social distance. It made it a lot easier. I don't think we had well, yes, I think they cut up and ate melon, but there was not any last year food that they had to prep. But it's always stuff like they made, I want to say, like chickweed pesto. And so the idea is like that so much stuff is edible, even stuff we consider weeds, you can still eat it. So we have done that. And then one thing I did, this was on a previous garden that I was involved with. At the harvest party, I went around and got donations from local like greenhouses and growing places. And then we had a member of the Horticultural Society come in and judge. People like, as if it was this exhibition, right? So people submitted their biggest zucchini or their best ear of corn, or, you know, whatever they were super proud of. And we had a community member from the Horticultural Society judge them, and then they had prizes. And then we had a big door prize as well. We've done a corn roast in the past. So kind of those year-end harvest parties are very popular, I think. And yeah, but I love the ideas coming out. I love the idea too of people sharing recipes from the things that they're growing. I think that's really, really great too. So Leona, you had something?
Yeah. One of the things, so we've done all of the above in terms of, you know, little celebrations, pre-COVID, little celebrations, harvest festivals, that sort of thing, educational workshop typey stuff. But one of the things that we started to address the issue of new gardeners was we actually have people who are, I'm included in that, willing to have a sign on their plot called Garden Mentor. And then that way, if we're in the garden, people can come and ask us questions. So, and there's a few of us that have been gardening for multiple decades now. So yeah, we just let our name stand as a garden mentor, get a sign put on our plot, and people get to know us that way. So
That's a really good idea. That's something we struggle with, is how to identify people who are willing to knowledge share. And we're working with an organization locally, a sustainability group, and we've talked about having that that piece of a skill share program on a kind of an informal basis. So that's, I like the idea of a sign that really clarifies it for people. Wanda, did someone else have their hand up? Sorry, I don't know if I missed that.
Nope.
So we're at 11:12. So I just want to maybe go to the last comment or question there, which is, what are your challenges? I mean, I think we've covered that a bit. What's working? I like a lot of the ideas coming out of this community building. But if you have any kind of like cool little life hacks, I guess, that have worked really well for your gardens, share those with us. And then any recommended resources. So if you know of grants that are really well suited to community gardens, or other resources, I was going to mention a couple of those in there. I always like to, Jeanetta's not on here anymore, but the Sustainable Food Edmonton website under community gardens has some great information if you're looking. Alberta Health Services has a community garden manual. And Alberta Environment has a resource on vermicomposting. I'm going to just copy these into the chat box for you guys. And then I have listed a bunch of books. What we've done on our website is I list these books, and then I have the links for them to our public library, because I want to make sure that they're accessible. You don't want to be recommending things to people that they can't access because of inequities in their lives. So let's see here. I'm just going to put this in the chat, but these are books that are specific to gardening in Alberta that I have found very helpful. So you could look them up too at your local libraries and see. Sorry, that didn't copy over very nice, but you get the idea of it. So those are just a few resources. So if anyone else wants to share ideas or resources that works really well for them, please jump in.
Can I say something that I find useful is to use the cardboard mulch a lot to do the communal areas control, because I find that nobody wants to do the walkways, and sometimes the borders up beside people. So I always do the lasagna gardening there, because then it's just hassle free. I'm not chasing anybody. It's really not their area, and it lessens my workload, because then I'm not having to come there every day. I can just come there once a week and just kind of maintain things.
Yeah, in addition to that, I wanted to say, Wanda, I don't know if other people have done this, but at our one community, our in-ground one, like the paths are a huge problem, because people are supposed to be maintaining the path adjacent to their plot, but because people are walking on it, the soil is so hard that trying to get weeds out of it is really difficult, and it just starts looking rough. So actually a couple of years ago, one of the people involved with the garden brought in rolls of carpet. I don't know if they had been ripped out of a house. So it was low pile carpet, and people could cut what they wanted from these rolls that sit on the edge of the garden, and they were put into paths, and then nothing grew up underneath it. So it's a little bit of a patchwork looking thing, but it has helped in those areas where they were not being maintained before. And Yeah, it looks a little funny, but whatever. It does have to be removed eventually, and sometimes if it wears, it will start getting stuff growing up through it, but it works better than nothing. Leona.
So as I mentioned earlier, there's a recognition that your plot is included there's a perimeter around your plot as well as the plot itself, and anything beyond that is community space and subject to your community hours of weeding. So point one. Point two is that we have a deal with a local arborist here who dumps wood chips out in front of our garden so that we have lots of mulch. And we mulch the paths, and sometimes that, in the spring when it's a cleanup, we clean it up and then there's a mulching bee, for example. The other thing is that even though we strive to be quote unquote organic, and we don't permit the use of chemicals within the garden, on an annual basis, we decided, and it's approved on an annual basis, we decided to spray around the outside, a certain perimeter around the outside of the fenced part of our garden. And that is because we're literally on prairie, and field bindweed and thistles are our two nemesis. And so it's just to get a handle on it. Now we have planted native grasses, but they haven't overtaken where the bindweed and the thistle flourish, put it that way. And so basically we check in with everybody, and if everybody's okay, we spray early in the season so that it's mostly dissipated by the time we actually get to planting in May. And that way it has helped to curb some of the weed problem, because field bindweed, if you've studied it, and I have because I've been trying to deal with it, has two sets of roots, and there's a lateral set that go out about 12 inches below, and then a much deeper set that go way down below, and plus they spring up, plus if you let them get to seed, it's a nightmare. Anyway, so we try to get a curb on that in the beginning, and then we do heavy weeding and mulching on the pathways inside. So
yeah, bindweed is not something you want to get into a garden space. That's for sure.
But it's mostly the relationship we have with this arborist, and we just have a little, the quid pro quo is we have a little sign advertising, ladybug arborist, but she keeps the mulch just happening, and as we want, we can weed and mulch as we want.
Yeah, and so another thing with the mulch, like here in Medicine Hat, we have city contractors who do the city trees, and one year we got mulch from them. Now I can't remember, it was either very inexpensive or we had to just provide the trucking for it. But I just wanted to suggest this. So I don't know, depending on where you're at, but that year we had it was a year we were doing this kind of intensive new gardening program. And we had turned a couple of plots into kind of like example plots for people to learn how to garden in. And so we had brought in huge truckloads of compost and mulch. And we actually were contacted coincidentally at the same time by a 4-H club. So that's what I would recommend. A lot of 4-H clubs have a community service component of work, and I find those 4-H kids are willing to do a lot of hard work in a way that a lot of people are not, like hard physical labor even. So and that might be helpful if you're doing a big project like that you could maybe accomplish in a day or two, that you need many hands. 4-H clubs, definitely the way to go, or possibly other troops like junior forest wardens or scouts or Girl Guides. Any of those groups usually have some kind of a badge or a community service component part of their programming that they might be willing to come out and help. Anyone else have any comments or questions for any other participants on the call?
I've got 10 pages of notes handwritten, but so I'm thinking what I'll do is I will, instead of saying per person, because a lot of it could get condensed down. But man, the ideas today are amazing, especially perhaps for like Clinton, who's starting out. Wow, what a resource to get going. So yeah, I'll condense that down and send it to Allison, and then we'll post it on the AFM. So before you wrap up, Allison, are you going to talk about potentially doing a follow-up or something to?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm assuming, Wanda, that you have everyone's contact information because they had to email you or register and you had to send them the link, right? So we've got everyone.
Well, actually, no. So what I did was I just posted it on AFM. And some of the people I did post it into a private message to them, but I'm thinking in the future, what I'll just do is look for it as an event on Alberta Food Matters. That's easier to manage, then I don't have to. But if you want me to put you in the loop of Alberta Food Matters for other stuff that we're doing, because we are doing webinars on other things like aquaponics, hydroponics, stuff like that, then you could get a hold of admin at Alberta Food Matters and I'll put you on our mail list. Thanks, Allison.
So maybe if everyone could if you go to the chat and put Wanda is the host, send her your email with your name, and then we would have your contact information to send stuff out to in the future. Because I know back when I used to do these twice a year, I used to send out information to all previous participants to see if they wanted to come on again. But I think, Jen, sorry, I'm going to get to you in a second. I see your hand up there. But I think in the future, yeah, we could talk about maybe asking people what kind of calls they would want to have. I used to do 3 twice a year. So I did on good food clubs, community gardens, and community kitchens. But I know we could talk a lot about more event style based conversations, like things like CD Saturday. Is a big event that a lot of communities host, and a lot of work goes into it. And although it's a single thing in the year, it requires usually a lot of work, and people can get a lot of ideas on how to do that. So maybe if you have an idea of something you'd like to have more conversations like this around, if you wanted to email Wanda, and then we can coordinate those going forward. Jen, you had something you wanted to add.
I wanted to ask, because one of the commenters talked about the invasive species when it comes to community gardens. So like I know like the weed invasive species, but I was wondering if she could give us a list of what she considered the invasive garden species.
So things that gardeners would be planting purposefully, but are actually not good to have in your garden.
Yeah, or something that we'd have to manage or monitor. Yeah.
Right.
That was
I'd
me,
love
and
a-
I can put it in the chat. I can put
That
the
would be
link to it.
lovely.
That would be awesome, Leona. Thank you. Yes, I know that sometimes I'm weeding away and I find things, I know they're not a weed, but they are something that has blown in from a neighbor's garden, and they just love to take seed. And some things drop tremendous amount of seed too and grow for a long time. So if you've ever grown physalis, it has lots of different names, but like Cape gooseberry or sun cherry, it has lots of names. It will keep reseeding itself forever and ever and ever if you leave any of those fruits on the ground. So it's not considered an invasive species and it's edible, but some things just grow like weeds, literally. Any other questions or comments? And Wanda, you're able to take notes out of the chat, right? Like copy over information from the chat?
Yep.
Okay, good. So one other question, are we gonna you're just gonna post these on the AFM Facebook page or the website?
On the Facebook page. I think that's better because that's where people have gone to get this. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, so keep checking back to the Alberta Food Matters Facebook page, and this will be eventually on there. If you think of something after the fact that you think, oh, this was something I wanted to share, or this is a great resource I knew about, please email that to Wanda. She's included her email address there. And yeah, and then we'll have that up hopefully I don't know what Wanda's timeline is on that, but keep checking back. If you haven't already liked the Alberta Food Matters Facebook page, please do that as well. So thank you everyone for participating today. I really appreciate it. I hope you felt like this was a valuable use of your time and that it gave you some ideas, maybe some contacts from other communities for programs if you're needing to find information about how other communities are running things. That's one thing I found in the past was very helpful, was connecting with other community organizations to move your own programs forward. So thanks everyone for coming, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Allison. That was awesome.
Thank you. So how was that, Wanda? Was that okay? You're on mute still.
It was really good. I am thinking these notes are invaluable. It'll be, so I'm just gonna, maybe what I should do is send you the notes first, because
Okay.
you could kind of go through and just say,
Yeah.
or add things that you think I missed. Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
good.
that's what Susan and I used to do. Susan used to mostly take the notes. She'd send them to me. I'd fill in gaps if I like, I'm kind of a person where I'm an auditory learner, so I keep it all in my head, and then as I read it, I can put stuff in. But
So I'm going to do that. I'll do that real quick so that you know, so that it's fresh in your mind.
And then we can get that posted to everyone. Yeah, I think that was good. And
Okay.
I think it's really, there's been quite a turnover in community people, I've noticed. Even I was talking to Tom Gervin at the Edmonton Food Council yesterday, and I noticed that Ken Lehman has gone from Red Deer, and like there has been some change in like that senior leadership piece. That's good to keep connected.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Well, and I was thinking maybe Renee Michalak would have come on, because he's had years of experience with.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually call the city of Red Deer and see what's going on with their position there, because Ken's moved over to the college, but I don't know if they've replaced him at the city, and he was a really good resource too, especially like Calgary and Edmonton have great programs, but they're huge cities. And so when smaller communities are looking to implement programming, you can't look at Edmonton or Calgary to look as a model, because it's not applicable in a small community. So to have the Lethbridge, Red Deer, Medicine Hat for those mid-size, or the Grand Prairie or Peace River or Fort McMurray, and then the next level down is that really small town, because we've had people on from like Alex, which I think has like 200 people in the town itself. You know what I mean? So there's benefits and also things that are not so great, risks that go with each size and with each model, right? The nice thing about smaller places is you can get around without a lot of the bureaucracy. You can make things happen, but you don't have the systems in place for the support often in the long term, whereas you have that in Edmonton and Calgary, where they've got dedicated staff who will continue to support neighborhood associations or not-for-profits that are running things. So yeah, it's really a trade-off.
And I find it's your community champions, you're always going to have them in the big centers, but in the small centers, the community champion gets old or
retires. We've just lost a community champion from one of our school districts, and she was the pivotal piece that led us into schools and forced the board into letting us run. You know what I mean? Like that just made stuff happen. And it's amazing how much you can lose from one person's role changing in an institution.
So I want to tell you what we're working on. BC has an amazing program called animators, which is a bad term, because whenever I've mentioned animators to anybody here, they're like, what are they, cartoonists? No, it is so fun. Anyway, so the animators in BC, they started off with a couple, now they're up to 7, and they're working on an 8th. And those animators take 1 or 2 school divisions, and they work with them to put in community gardens, put in aquaponics, whatever. So they're working on connecting the kids with the food system. And it's also more sustainable because it's a position, it's paid, and it's not waiting for a community champion.
To step forward. Yeah.
And then you also don't lose a community champion because this animator is going to make sure that things keep going.
Yeah, they could have picked a better name, I think.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of it. I think that's so important. And yeah, I see that happen all the time. Like we'll have a school locally that will have an amazing school food program. And then the teacher who was running everything moves to a different district or a different school or whatever. And the entire thing just disappears. It's just gone.
Yeah.
There's no way to, yeah. And it's really unfortunate because we've seen some fantastic programming happen and then it just stops. And that's what I was really hoping with the school food nutrition program through the province, that we'd have some consistency. But the problem is we never know. I mean, the budget comes down tomorrow too. We don't ever know 1 year to the next what funding's going to be like. Then you have to have people in place. I was reviewing the report from the pilot. I don't know, did you read through that? From the school food nutrition? I'll send it to you.
So good, thank you.
So they did a report. So initially it was my understanding. I don't think Anita's actually on this call. I don't know, you might want to I think you can close her out. I think because she was on another meeting as well at the same time, I think, but I'll send you that report. But I was very interested to read it because there wasn't a lot of, there was not really strict parameters around it, which I thought was good because what I enjoyed reading through it was seeing how different schools and districts decided to use the funding. And some very innovative ways. And because they had to really make it work depending on what kind of facility they currently had, right? Like a lot of schools do not have food prep areas. They're dealing with all kinds of issues around that. But the one thing I was super disappointed in, and I had wanted to talk to you about this actually, but I maybe should send it to you first and let you read it, but I'm just gonna bring it to your attention. So I know that there is, I'm just trying to find the report here. I have it in a stack on my desk. Or I did. Oh, where did I put it? Anyways, so you know there's a organization in Edmonton that works specifically with a school. I don't know that it's the district, but it's with a local school. I'm trying to think of what it's called. I will find it and send it to you. But they actually, I was actually really upset when I read this because they not only should have known in advance best practice because they were a food security organization pre-existing within that, you know, they already had relationship there. They didn't even initiate providing food in the first semester, possibly even the first year, because they wanted to study the best way to do it. Do you know what I mean? And they had been given money. And I'm just like, honestly, it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah, just do it.
Especially when you think that kids went hungry in that time that could have been fed. And I was really disappointed when I read that. I've got to find it and I'll point it out to you. But I was like, honestly.
But you know, that is, I find that some school divisions are so baby steps conservative, and it's just like you said, you got the money, and those kids in that year, because some school divisions will take money that they've got for whatever student programming, and they will siphon it into their reserves.
Yeah.
So and I think it's unconscionable that they build up these reserves on the backs of those students each of those years that they siphon. It's unconscionable.
When you're talking about food and food security, that's like literally taking the food out of children's mouths. So I was horrified when I read that. I will send you the report and I'll send you the name of which organization it was. But I was so disappointed in that. So disappointed.
Yeah.
Like that,
But you know, the other thing, I'm very disappointed that a lot of school divisions that could have done better ended up just, they couldn't be bothered, and so they just made contracts with Gordon Foods or Cisco and brought in all this packaged food, which
Yeah.
is hugely expensive. So instead of being able to offer snacks and a hot lunch, they
Yes.
could only pay for $5 per child
I know.
because it's so expensive to order from those guys.
And that's the issue too here at my own school division. So I'm the parent wellness champion at my children's school. So they go to a grade 7 to 12, 1,300 students school. And they have now, this is the first year, they have a Red Seal chef who is planning menus at the 2 local high schools with the division, which is great. But I called the division to talk to them about it because the cost per meal is $5, a flat $5. And I said, do you realize that at Moscow-Cis, Scott is making a snack and a hot meal for $1.75 a student a day. And that includes infrastructure and capital costs.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, what is the premise here? Is it cost recovery? Is it a money-making venture? I thought, how could it only be cost recovery at $5?
Yep.
That is insane to me. How could the costs be that high? Because this is the first year they've not had they used to have a service, like they had a contract with a meal provider.
But you know, the thing that they might be doing is instead of involving the students, which this should be food literacy. Like it should be mandated as part of the whole program. It's food literacy so that the students are engaged while they're free. It's credits.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why Scott's is so cheap, is because it's food literacy.
Yeah, and he's got all those students participating too. And but the thing about Scott is he's got such tremendous support from his tribal council and his boards, and community. They see the value of what he's doing. And it's like trying to change that mentality, I think, is so hard. I've been trying to persistently talk to the student services at both our divisions here about it, like universal school food programming. Here's what other communities are doing. After the food symposium, I sent some notes, brief notes, because I know they don't have a lot of time to read, but links to some of the really great programs running, because I wanted them to see what's happening in the province and what can be done. And but it feels like often a losing battle. But yeah, I'll send you that report and I'll mark which organization it was. But I was just like, are you kidding? I was so mad when I read it. I felt like phoning them.
I don't even have children in your school and I just want to blow off steam here.
I felt like saying, like, this, why would you do this? What is that saying about perfection being the enemy of how does it go? But like basically waiting for something to be perfect before you do it.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. You know, unbelievable that a board could sit around that table and think that was the best decision.
I know.
Serious? Wow.
I can't get over. So anyways, I will do that. But thank you very much for this.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to what the other things that we could potentially do. I'm just like, oh, wow, that would be amazing.
Yeah. We always had good response from the kitchens and the gardens. The Good Food Club, not so much. We did not have hardly, because that's not that's a less common food security program, right? Yeah. There's only, I want to say, a handful or two in the province running. And
but is Good Food sort of like growing for food banks? Is that sort of the idea?
No, okay. It's the wholesale produce purchasing clubs. So so packing, like people order a box based on value, like in ours it's a $10, $15 or $20 value, and then we have ours once a month. So then I order all the produce and we have volunteers that pack it all, and then people pick up their their bins. So there's Food for Good in Edmonton. There's one in Lloydminster, Vermilion area. There's one in Fort Macleod. They're off and on. There's one in Brooks, depending on if they have funding, but they don't have a coordinator. So that theirs has come in my time in this position, theirs has come and gone twice. So
Yeah.
Calgary
Yeah,
has,
so like you say, it's pretty much niche. It's a
yeah,
niche.
it is.
Yeah.
Calgary has a huge one. They're supported by the United Way. I talked to their coordinator last year about it, but they've seen their numbers go down a lot. And the thing we've noticed is that there's a few factors. One is transportation is always, to me, is an equivalent barrier with finances to accessing food. And then people want choice. So you don't get a choice. You get a bin of vegetables and fruit that has been usually a seasonal and best value, right? That's how how you keep the prices low. But people want to be able to choose what they're buying. So that's an issue. And for us, it's only once a month and people want it more than that. So we're actually right now in talks with Fresh Roots. Are you familiar with them in Calgary and Edmonton? They're a mobile grocery. Low-cost grocery, and we're in talks with bringing them into Medicine Hat as well. And I don't know if you've talked to Rhonda Reach lately, but they're bringing them into 2 reserves down by Fort Macleod.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, I have not. I haven't talked to her since January. Okay.
Yeah, so
something else that we're doing that is sort of connected to the community gardening. Oops. We are, that I wonder if you are interested in participating. We are taking those foods teachers, gardening, school farm, and we are talking to our home ec teachers. But I'm thinking, no, we should put it out to more people than just the home ec teachers. So I'll invite the home ec teachers, but do you think that there's any interest, even from the community gardening people, to take part in a aquaponics or hydroponics or school for orchard? I wonder if that's even their shtick.
well, I think that right now, currently, like I don't know how it's working in other divisions, but right now, people are not allowed into the schools under any circumstances. Like I'm a parent and I am not allowed to go into the school. Even after hours, we're not allowed to come into the building proper. And so that makes it tricky for all that stuff that we used to do, like community collaborations with teachers. None of that can happen. Teachers are at capacity because some of them are teaching in the classroom and online and with fewer resources and trying to set stuff up. And the big issue, I don't know if you follow this a lot, but with exposures and teachers having to quarantine because of exposures, there's a shortage of substitute teachers even. Like people are just like scrambling constantly just to maintain any kind of. So I feel like until maybe even the fall, trying to initiate anything might be hard.
Right.
That has an actual practical application where people need to do hands-on things, just because we can't do hands-on things and teachers are already at capacity. But I think it depends. Again, it's that idea of like in smaller centers or people have more leeway, they get different community support. Like I feel like even in Medicine Hat that I'm just like butting my head up against things a lot of the time because you hit up against these institutions and it's like, well, no, our policy is this, or we don't do it like that, or this is how this principal wants things to be. And whereas like I look at, is it Altana? What is that?
Altera.
Altera. I follow him now on everything on Instagram and Facebook and or like the Vermilion school too. Like the high schools that have agriculture and farm programs, like they've gotten community support in a way that is hard to have up here.
So there's another one that just started and he's not, I mean, they just got started and they're still running classes in Airdrie, for goodness sakes. Did you see that one?
Really? No, what one is that?
Now, I'd have to, anyway, it's Matt, but I'll have to figure out what the name of that is.
Yeah, because I
He's-
love
he's really-
following all those. I love
Yes.
having that stuff show up in my feed. It just makes me so happy. Is it Kinsella School too? Is the other one in Edmonton? That
Yes,
has,
yeah,
oh, I just love seeing their greenhouse and their gardening programs, and I'm
Yep.
so covetous
Yep.
of that for my school districts and my city. I
Yes.
wish we had more of that.
yeah.
But I mean,
And you know, Fort McLeod,
yes,
that guy down there, now I don't know if it was Michael Lazzarato or the other guy, it was aquaponics guy or something,
yeah, I follow him
who
on Facebook.
said, like, you guys would be a shoe-in for them because you are much closer to him than a lot of other schools
Yeah.
to have him expand his program.
Yeah, see, what I found this
Absolutely.
year is by being the parent wellness champion, that gives me I like to come up from two sides. So I'm like the food security community person, but when I call the district, I'm also the parent wellness champion with school council. So I am calling you, asking you to do things on two fronts, right?
Right.
And
Actually, sorry, I've
No.
got a soup kitchen person that's trying to get a hold of me, and they're doing soup kitchen in like 15 minutes.
oh,
So
well,
I
I'll
better-
let you go. Yeah, I'll let you go, but I'll
Yeah.
send you that document because it's a very interesting read. And then, yeah, and then just let me know if you hear back from people, especially if they ask for specific things, so we can start,
Yeah.
we can plan some more.
Yes,
So-
awesome. Thanks so
That's-
much, Allison. That was great.
Thanks, Wanda. See
Okay.
you later.
Talk to you later.